Hello and welcome to the How Not to Screw Up Your Kids podcast, the bucket emptying episodes. I'm your host, Dr Maryhan, psychologist and parenting expert. So, pour yourself a cuppa, find a comfy seat and enjoy the conversation. This is a bucket emptying tip, actually, and it is the power of saying no. So I'd been pondering. I've done a lot of listener questions recently, and I've been pondering. I thought, what can I give as a bucket emptying? What really helps us empty that bucket and kind of give us the opportunity to do more of the things that we want. And actually, it is the power, the ability to say no. So much of what actually fills our bucket that then tips us in terms of overwhelm are the multitude of things that we juggle, not only in our role as parent, but maybe as our role as an employee, in terms of management, as a daughter, as a son, as an uncle, as an aunt, as a godson, all of those various different roles. We have multiple roles, and I talk about that aspect a lot. One of the things, though, is that we find it really difficult. Some people find it particularly difficult to say thank you, but no. So let's kind of heighten the awareness of that. So let's talk a little bit about this, because what can often happen is that we find ourselves saying yes to things just out of default. During the pandemic, I think in lots of ways, it was incredibly liberating because a lot of those additional commitments that we had, we were no longer able to fulfill. And that was really bucket relieving for so many people. It was like weight had been lifted off, expectations, whether it's to do with our families, expectations, whether it was to do with our work, whatever it was, or our children's school, it was suddenly that weight was just completely lifted off us. And I held very high hopes that we would remember this, and as things opened up and life reverted back to normal, that we would then be able to exercise that muscle that said, thank you very much for asking, but no thank you. But we haven't, have we? And we're still getting into those scenarios. So let's just talk about how we might find ourselves in that situation and how we can then make that shift to being able to do what is serving us. Sometimes it's about what we perceive are the expectations based on that particular role. So it may be expectations in our role with our work. It may be in terms of our role and expectations with our children as part of being a parent. It might be in terms of friendships. It might be related to our wider family. You know that I'm talk a lot about this idea about having that ability to take a step back, to do some form of reflective practice, whether that's journaling or whether that's just giving yourself 20 minutes in the morning to come into your day intentionally. What you do in that time is that allows you to review where you're currently at, where you're showing up, how you're feeling. Are you exhausted? Have you found yourself being particularly short? Are you feeling put upon, taken advantage of, overwhelmed, juggling too many balls? Whatever that might be, having that time allows you to really reflect on that. And as a result, really ask yourself some very poignant questions. Why am I feeling overwhelmed in that particular situation? Why am I feeling put upon? Why am I feeling unappreciated? And the answer is very often that we have taken on too much, not because we're incapable. I'm sure we're capable of juggling multiple things, but we're stretched in so many different directions. We're pulled because we have all of these various different roles. So by just giving ourselves that opportunity to reflect, we can see which area we're feeling the most pulled and what is it specifically. So have we committed to being involved actively in our children's school or nursery? And quite frankly, we just don't have the time. Have we committed ourselves to something at work that really is not something that we want to engage in, or is pulling at our heartstrings because we're then feeling guilty with our children? So it may well be we want to do that commitment with work, but actually we're feeling overwhelmed in that feeling that we've let our children down, or we're failing in that responsibility. So it's really being able to see in what role is it that we're feeling that overwhelm or feeling put upon, and what is it specifically that is causing that bucket to tip. And then it's simply asking ourselves a really honest question. Is this something that I really want to do? First question. The second one is, if I wasn't doing this, what would I be doing with my time? And that's not about if I wasn't doing that, then I wouldn't be doing something productive. It may well be that by not doing that, you'd be able to decompress. You'd be able to relax. Maybe by not doing that, you'd then be able to engage it more in the things that you love and that you want to do. So it's really being able to take that step back and really look at it objectively. And then you have to say to yourself that if the answer is that it's something that's making you feel overwhelmed, that it's something that you've sort of agreed to off the cuff, that you didn't necessarily want to, or that you just said out of default, that what you then need to do is have that difficult conversation and actually unpick it. Because the idea is that we only have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of resources. When we take on more and more and say yes and agree to things, that means that by saying yes to that, we're saying no to something else. And more often than not, the no is not necessarily with anyone else, but actually we're saying no to ourselves, no to our recharge. And then what then happens is, over a period of time, we know that the bucket overflows. It's overwhelming. And what happens is we don't show up in our best self in those other situations. So when we recognize that, we do have to go and have some of those difficult conversations. Now, it may be that you can't have that difficult conversation because the commitment you have made is as such that you quite genuinely need to see it through. But be sure that you are being honest with yourself when you are saying it's a commitment you need to see through, because a lot of the time it actually isn't. And there are other people who could step up. It's just you have had this habit of always saying yes, which is why they've always gone to you. So that's the first thing, is looking at that. And then the other thing is really trying to understand not necessarily the motives, but the reason why you keep saying yes. Now, is it you keep saying yes because actually you find it really difficult to say no? You find it really difficult to create and be disciplined around boundaries. So if that is the case, and that's often the case with so many of us, I want you to practice. Sounds silly, sounds ridiculous, but you are much more likely to use this in the same way as I say to your children. You're much more likely to use the tools and strategies that help manage anxiety if you have practiced them. In the same ways, if you have practiced being intentional and saying, thank you so much, I feel so incredibly flattered that you have asked me to be involved in this. Right now, I have no more capacity. Practice it. Do it in front of the mirror. Keep saying it. Keep doing it. Change it from the language that I've used to something that feels comfortable with you, so that when you have those scenarios, you are able to respond in that way. Or if you can't, because quite often in the moment we feel like things have been positioned in such a way that we feel that we can't walk away, we can't sort of say no, then practice a holding response. Thank you so much. I feel incredibly flattered, really honoured that you thought of me. I need to take some time to just take stock of the commitments that I've currently got, and I'll get back to you in a week. Take the heat, the intensity, and the emotion out of that moment, and allow yourself to come away, reflect, be honest, to look, and then go back and say, you spoke to me the other day and asked if I'd love to get involved in this particular thing. I've given it a great deal of thought. Right now, I just cannot see that there is any capacity. Thank you very much for asking. And if you want to say, feel free to come back to me again another time. It's just right now I can't do it. But if there are other opportunities, maybe next year, 6 months, 3 months, then come back to me. If you have no intention and actually it's not something you want to do at all, then don't say that. But I do think that there's a real art form to this. There's a real skill, and some people are phenomenal at having boundaries. If you want to carve out that time, if you want to really be intentional in your life, then you need to choose what you say yes to and what you say no to, rather than feeling that you always have to say yes. It's something that we've got to practice. It's a muscle that we need to flex and that we need to exercise regularly in order to get supremely comfortable with that. And that's where the practice comes in. So I hope you find that helpful, because actually the ability to say no is a gift. And that gift comes when we practice it. So I hope you find that a really useful resource. By all means, if you've got any more questions about this or any other questions that you'd like me to answer, write into me directly at contact@drmaryhan.com. As ever, if you have enjoyed this episode, I would be eternally grateful if you could follow, rate and review this podcast so that others can find us and we can spread the love. So until next time.